Hello, my name is Allie Wolf, and I'm a senior Women's and Gender Studies major at Wheaton College in Massachusetts. Today, I wanted to discuss how the suffrage movement was powered by a queer woman, and I want to highlight one individual in particular, Alice Dunbar-Nelson. Alice Dunbar-Nelson was born on July 19, 1875, in New Orleans, Louisiana. She was a prolific writer, poet, and activist, often addressing themes of racism and sexuality in her work. In the campaign for women's suffrage, Dunbar-Nelson worked as a field organizer for the Middle Atlantic states. Dunbar-Nelson toured Pennsylvania, New York, and New Jersey, appealing to black and white audiences to support women's right to vote, while also fighting against racial discrimination and violence against the black community. In the public sphere, she had a respectable image as the widow of famous poet Paul Laurence Dunbar. Even after she was remarried to Robert Nelson in 1916, she kept Dunbar's name for the status it held and was known as Alice Dunbar-Nelson. Although she maintained this public face of a respectable heterosexual woman, privately, she engaged in romantic and sexual relationships with both men and women. She wrote about the details of some of these relationships in her diary. Black Women's Studies professor Akasha Gloria Hall compiled a decade's worth of Dunbar-Nelson's diaries and analyzed them within her 1986 novel, Give Us Each Day. Hall observed that black women were always mindful of their need to be living refutations of the sexual slur to which black women were subject, and, at the same time, as much as white women, were also tyrannized by the still prevalent Victorian cult of true womanhood. Hall analyzed Dunbar-Nelson's relations with female lovers, especially in one particular story about a woman by the name of Narka. In all of Dunbar-Nelson's writings, there is no declaration naming her sexual identity as one thing or the other. It just was. Alice Dunbar-Nelson left a record of her experiences as an activist and organizer in the women's suffrage movement in a scrapbook that consisted of roughly 30 pages. She kept this book for 5 months in the summer and fall of 1915 as she traveled and spoke throughout Pennsylvania, New York, and New Jersey, working on a campaign to pass a suffrage resolution. The scrapbook roughly follows a chronological order and includes newspaper clippings about her speeches, articles interviewing or quoting her, and flyers. It is interesting to note that there is no personal memorabilia within the scrapbook. The articles in the scrapbook are mostly from local newspapers, which indicates the extent to which suffrage campaigns took place town by town, how invisible organizing can be, and how crucial it is to look at records like the scrapbook. The cover has a glamorous photo of Dunbar-Nelson together with what appears to be a sticker of a map of the United States shaded to show suffrage progress with the slogan, Votes for Women. The map proves it a success. Alaska 1913, Pennsylvania 1915. The map graphically shows the spread of states where women have partial or full suffrage. Alice Dunbar-Nelson's photograph is one element of her self-presentation in the scrapbook. Nearly all the clippings in this scrapbook feature her as Mrs. Paul Laurence Dunbar and as the poet's widow, which all connects to this concept of holding a respectable public image. As we see in this newspaper clipping, it is titled Negro Poet's Widow to Devote Herself to Suffrage Cause. The article claims that Dunbar-Nelson is a woman of unusual beauty and a brilliant conversationalist. The article goes on to discuss her background and her desire to join the suffrage movement after her husband passed, and gives us more insight into how she was perceived in public life. This next scrapbook page has news clippings related to her speeches, claiming how she is a much sought-after public speaker. Interestingly, this article says the meeting will be open to any white friends who may wish to attend and does not include those who might identify as black, even though it claims that Mrs. Dunbar takes great pride in her race. Again, the article alludes to her successes and her beauty and charming manner. On the bottom right of the scrapbook page, we see the report on the meeting. It claims to have been successful and how the officers of the Women's Party of Derby were present to hear Dunbar-Nelson speak. She is said here to be the best who has yet been heard. The last scrapbook page I will be sharing, we see a focus on race as a news clipping is titled County Colored Suffrage Rally Here Friday Night. Here we see an image of not just Alice M. Dunbar, but also one of Mary Church Terrell. This is more or less an announcement of the rally and sharing the prominent speakers, one being Dunbar-Nelson. The meeting promised to be one of the biggest rallies of this kind ever held in the state, being New Jersey. It was just an honor for Dunbar-Nelson to be speaking, and one can know this by the sheer fact that she chose to put this in her scrapbook. Overall, these pages are reflective of Alice Dunbar-Nelson's speeches and the general women's suffrage ideology of the period. We also gain an understanding of the women's suffrage in the context of the black and even arguably the queer community. It is important to acknowledge queer suffragists as they made significant contributions to the movement while navigating the complexities of their personal and public lives. Their stories, like Alice Dunbar-Nelson's, deserve to be told. We can conclude that queer suffragists thus were fighting for much more than the right to vote, but for a world where they could be freely themselves and live who they wanted regardless of their racial or gender identity.